I've got a really wild game to show you here with an amazing finish. So this is played in the FIDE Grand Swiss tournament taking place in Samarkand at the moment. Really important tournament because the top two players will qualify for the Candidates Tournament 2026. So the entry is incredible. I mean, what a lineup. Anyway, let's concentrate on this game. Aditya Mittal, 18 years old from India, playing against 14-year-old Khan Erdogmus from Turkey. He is one of the top talents at the moment. I mean, his live rating is already 2646, already in the top 100 players in the world. So we have a pretty orthodox start. It's a Queen's Gambit, and Erdogmus plays the Queen's Gambit accepted. Now you can go e3 here, but e4. So white center is challenged immediately with c5. White pushes on. An exchange. Can play knight takes, but pawn takes. Going for a passed pawn in the middle of the board. But that gets blockaded. And knight e7. So an interesting struggle, whether this is not that good because it blocks white's pieces, or could later on it could prove its worth. One doesn't know at the moment. But at the moment, yeah, very solidly blockaded by the bishop. It's a fairly unusual position actually. Doesn't occur that often. And Aditya thought for almost 15 minutes here and played h3, which looks a bit tame to me. Could just develop the knight to f3. Because I'm not sure the bishop would have been that well placed on g4 anyway for blacks. But anyway, development from both players. Knight b6, so if the bishop moves back, then there's going to be a problem with the pawn, so that bishop is defended. And Erdogmus exchanges knight for bishop and knight g6. So that exchange, well, it's hard to say who benefits from that exchange actually. Later on, if black can get in, then that pawn could be a target for the bishop. But okay, we're talking very long term, and it's quite nice for white to have that pawn on d5 really solidly protected now. Knight e4, and Aditya decides to exchange off the bishop on d6. Queen b3. Again, it's very hard to say who's better in this position. Both sides have their pluses. And a4. So this is the classic minority attack to create a weakness on b6, and this is a big moment in the game actually, where black has to decide strategically what he wants. And Erdogmus plays a5, which basically keeps more tension. So black has a weakness on b6, but white has two weaknesses, potential weaknesses on a4 and c4 if somehow that bishop can get in. But that certainly wasn't the only way to play. One could play rook e8. And actually, in this kind of position, I think black is really solid. I mean, I wouldn't count this as much of a weakness, and sometimes it can simply advance to undermine the pawn on d5. So I think black would also be okay there. But a5, yeah, keeps more tension. Fewer exchanges. Both sides contesting the e-file, and h6. Okay, it's a useful move just to give the king a flight square on h7. Now, at this point, the computer says that the position is about equal. But I think there are certain challenges for white in this position. I mean, one thing is it's very hard to increase the pressure on b6 because b1 square is covered. If all the major pieces were exchanged, then that pawn on a4 could well be vulnerable, because the bishop could attack it very easily from these squares. And I think, black is pretty well coordinated here. Now, Aditya plays rook a2. Well, as regular viewers of this channel will know, I always have qualms when the rooks are split, and this does actually come into play tactically later on. So let's see, bishop e4. And in fact, white is still okay. The computer likes bishop d2 just to make sure everything is protected. And it seems to hold things together for white. But instead, knight d2, and this gives Erdogmus the chance to come forward with knight h4, and the queen can now switch to g6. If this is exchanged off, then that allows rook number 2 over, and black certainly has the initiative there. But Aditya goes for some wild tactics. Bishop takes c5. Now, clearly, if queen takes bishop, then rook takes. So it's that wins a pawn. So this needs to be calculated very carefully by both sides. And Erdogmus played queen g6, threatening mate in one. So that has to be dealt with. Queen g3 would just lose the piece. Pawn takes bishop. So g3 is necessary. And now things just start to get absolutely crazy. Bishop g2. Don't need to play bishop g2 actually. Bishop f5 would also be reasonable. I mean, it was also possible to play pawn takes, and this should be about equal. But bishop g2 basically enters into absolutely wild complications. So let's see. What about pawn takes knight? Well, then just bishop here and queen g2 mate. With bishop g2, I should mention that there's a problem here with the rook. You can see tactically, this is why it can be a little bit dubious to split those rooks. So it introduces some tactical possibility for black. So bishop e7 was played. So I mean, this is such an odd position with these minor pieces, very strange squares. And this is a self-pin as well. So bishop takes pawn. Now you can't play bishop takes knight because of rook takes rook. So you can see that white's king is really weakened here. So king h2. Now it remains really strange. Knight g2. In fact, bishop d7 is a better move, according to the machine. But and the point is this: after bishop d7, again, it's very, very tactical. If pawn takes, then rook takes bishop, and check, exploiting the open king. And although material is even, I think you can see that white's position is a little bit ragged there, basically. Yeah, see that pawn? Bishop attacks the pawn, tying the rook down. Black is better there. Anyway, Erdogmus played knight g2. So he's clearly got an eye for complications, and I mean, it's a very strange position. So the rook is hit, rook e5. It's a good move because basically black wants to play queen h5 here. So that prevents that. But f6, so trying to drive the rook away. So if the rook drops back to e2, then queen h5, and something nasty is going to happen here. The queen is on an absolutely beautiful square. Okay, so queen b6 played. So the players matching each other blow for blow here. You can see pawn takes rook is impossible because the queen hangs. I mean, what a strange position. With pieces kind of strewn all over the place. And it continues. Knight f4. So that does protect the bishop. Pawn takes knight, obviously impossible because of queen g2 mate. But can black sort of get out of this tangle? Oh yeah, the other thing about knight f4 is it protects the queen. So now pawn takes rook becomes a possibility. Rook e4 played. I mean, to divine what's going on here in the game with limited time would be extremely difficult. The computer thinks that the game should drift to a draw after this, and this results in a draw by perpetual check, and so on. And you can do this as well, queen g4, yeah, it'll end in a draw. You can check that out yourself. That's just for the record. But rook e4 played, which doesn't look bad. Queen h5, rook takes knight. Bishop g4 check, and rook takes bishop. So material is sort of even. White is a pawn up, but white's king could still be in trouble. So there's a check threatened here. So therefore rook a1, rook e8 still wants to check on e1. And in fact rook e1 is the best move here. That's the strongest move, with this simple idea, with the threat of rook takes knight and queen h1 mate, and that should be winning. White has to give up the exchange, and for example this is good. Anyway, that wasn't played. Bishop h3 was played. So this is certainly not a perfect game, but it is spectacular. I mean, at the moment it's just really wild. The computer believes that rook h4 is the best move, but listen, let's crack on. It's too complicated to go through all these lines. But we're going to have a think and drink moment in a second. Rook takes bishop was necessary here to give up the exchange. But queen b5. And Aditya went for glory with d7. I can imagine that there was time pressure involved here. Rook takes knight. Queen b8. And queen. So black actually has a bit of a choice in this position. I think this is the perfect moment when I should just pause and have a nice glass of tea. Cheers. So I'll have a drink, you have a think. Black to play. What would you do here? Green tea, by the way. I'm breaking the habit of a lifetime with going for green tea. I'm away, you can see I haven't got my usual stash of Yorkshire tea to hand, so I'm on the green tea. Okay, what are you going to do? Well, if you wanted to play rook takes queen, fair enough. Because actually, there's no doubt that black is better here. In fact, g5 is very uncomfortable for white. The rook can't shift over here because there's a queen h3 check and rook e1. The rook has to go back, and this is better for black, no doubt about it. However, hopefully you spotted the spectacular finish. Here we go. And this is going to be Erdogmus's Immortal game. Queen takes f2. Rook e1 check. It's all forced. And then the king gets checked up the board and finally gets checkmated with g6. So isn't this great? We've got two queens on the board, but it's still checkmate. And I have to say how very sporting of Aditya Mittal to go to checkmate. What a sound character. I have great admiration for him. But yeah, let's talk about Erdogmus, who, I mean, such a talent. 2646, that's his current rating. He's number 70 something in the world, so he's broken into the top 100, and he's only 14 years old. So he is really a great hope. He's Turkish, and I know there's a huge program of chess in Turkey at school level and going onwards. So watch out for him in the future. And at the moment he's on 3 out of 4 in the Grand Swiss. Parham Maksudlu from Iran is leading with 3.5. And well, I'll report back and let you know what happens. Thanks for watching.